today. But Chris has came up with this brilliant title, which I absolutely love, which is why extraordinary change with agility can lead to exceptional outcomes. And I sort of got me really thinking about that and actually what that really meant. So I really love that. So I think we're going to have some really good insights as far as today is concerned. And basically, those of you who are regulars here, we're very much here to support you in your business growth. We also recognize that running a business can be a very lonely journey, whether you're a company of one or a much larger organization. We're here for you to help you in your growth. If you feel that you would like others to benefit from this show today, do feel that you can share this via Facebook or by YouTube. And do feel that you can subscribe to it as well. Very keen to involve other people in this and on the ongoing discussions. For those who haven't already done it as part of today's session, if you could introduce yourselves in the chat, tell us a little bit about what you're really passionate about and why you do it. And also be bold with your questions by coming up with questions all the way through. Don't wait till the end. Come up with questions all the way through. We don't always see them straight away. Muriel tries to make sure as well we don't miss them, but do interact because we can feed those in, and obviously Chris will try and work it in that Chris has a chance to answer those as well. A very quick introduction from me and from Muriel. So I founded Business Growth Bureau about 7 years ago. One of the things I feel that's very important is that we should be here for our clients, as you would expect. But in real terms, it is about building on circular relationships. So what I would argue is that it's really important you think about all your clients, partners, associates, employees, suppliers, and so on. And of course, your own management team and all your people around you who are there to support you. And look at how you can give back, because that way you can build a really strong organization. Now, Muriel, you've been very patient. One way or another, you've worked with me for about 14 years or so, isn't it? Rather
for my sins, yes.
Muriel was talking about the fact that she had moved up to the Wirral a while ago. I'd love to think it wasn't because of me.
I see you more now because I see you umpteen times on Zoom every day.
That's true. So there's no real escape, especially with technology these days. And what I'd really like to do is just touch on for a split second is really what we're about. Is we want to help you in your journey, to help you to bring your sales forward, amplify your brand, and get your time back. And we predominantly do that through what we class as an optimized branding, marketing, and sales and client acquisition systems, which are there to help you to build your values and your brand, and also how you can amplify that, plug into what we class as social selling blueprint around lead generation, prospect nurturing, and sales optimization, and also look at how you can enhance client relationships, and also what strategies you can put in place to build a very strong referral system through member offers. Now, getting to the real meat of today, so very privileged to have Chris on today. And in fact, Chris, ever since I've known you, you've always been in the educational space. But just a couple of quick questions. I'd really like to get down to the real Chris Jones, and we'll start to ask some real questions around that. When I sort of met you perhaps 7, 8 years ago, however long it was, how long had you been within CJ Learning? Had you set that up about 4 or 5 years earlier, or because you were originally a headmaster, weren't you, yourself?
Yeah, this year is my 36th year involved in education. I started teaching in 1985 after 4 years at uni, learning how to be a teacher. I got to that point of leading school. I was head of school in terms of terminology. There's some slight differences between them. I'm qualified. I got my NPQH, National Professional Qualification for head teachers. I was involved in some of the biggest academy transformation programs within the UK in the late 2008, 2009. At that point, I decided that because I was already involved in school improvement, curriculum creation and sort of interrelationship with schools. I had a decision to make. Did I stay within one institution, or did I sort of apply my my abilities and skills in a wider sense? So in 2010, April 2010, we started CJ Learning. Today, I've been all over Britain, into Europe. We've talked to educators all over the world. Working with a whole load of schools, probably influenced more children than I could have ever have thought of working within one organisation. So this year is actually, so coming up to April the 1st will be our 11th year. We now actually have two companies. So CJ Learning is the consultancy and training and development side. CJ Learning Technologies provides an online platform of curriculum analysis, which is, the way, being efficient and being wise about the decisions we're making in terms of putting a school, constructing a school and how it works, or an educational organisation, because it's not just schools. But that's what we do, and it's been 11 years this year.
Well, it's quite some time, isn't it? And getting to the nub of the real Chris Jones as well. And I know you personally have very high values for yourself and your family, and a very strong sort of Christian background as well. But you yourself, as a headmaster, you actually decided to leave the education system some time ago, didn't you? And you could see big changes happening then before even the changes came about to do with all the academies and everything else. I think, would that be fair to say? And
yes, it would. I've always been at the kind of forefront. I mean, I worked for head teachers as I was going up, so as a deputy and as an assistant head and so on. So I've been through that process. But I worked for people who were described as the mavericks. They were always pushing the boundaries. They were the ones that were, with my help and input, and I was there at the centre of it. And in terms of changing, and do we have to do it the same way we've always done it? Why do we do the things that we do? And what baggage are we holding on to that's not actually serving us well? And how do we change? So my university days, I actually went into a course that was quite a new. So design technology was my background. So I was skilled with my hands, and I've taught in workshops and taught engineering and taught graphics, as we were saying earlier. So problem solving has always been in my blood. I've gone into some of the most challenging schools in the country. I'm not going to name them here, but where some of people will have recognised them on, been mentioned on the television or in the news or whatever. But some of these schools have had some challenging times, and I've been called in as a problem solver. And Chris, can you come? The decision I made from that, we all get to that point and we observe what's going on around us. And I made a decision that I was involved actually that position where I made the decision. I was involved in about 16 schools, although I was resident in one. I kind of made an evaluation, and although you use that term and people have said it of me, you left education to do what you're doing. I've never left it. I talk of myself as a practitioner, not as a consultant. I am a practitioner. I'm currently working with about 25 school leaders, but head teachers and CEOs of MATs. Currently today, so we're intimately involved. I work with the teams. I support the leadership team. I work at the strategic level, and we develop. The way I put it to people is, I've not left. I've just work in it differently. So our view of the way that we work is, you're employed by the organisation. Well, I stand on the edge of that. We still employ, because they still pay our way, but I have a different responsibility. So that's the maverick in me of let's find another way of doing this, and let's do it differently because it can be more effective. And I think what's
fantastic about your background as well, Chris, is that because you have got this not only broad knowledge, but you've also got a really strong in-depth knowledge in terms of the whole way the education system works, and also the challenge they faced. You've also, through this other venture of yours, developed some really good technology-based solutions to really help schools to save money and become much more efficient, much more agile, haven't you? So, and yeah, really keen to discuss that with you. And I think this sort of gets really to the next point really nicely, which is really all these areas that we plan to talk about today. And I must admit, I did, to my shame, I did have to look up online what VUCA actually meant. It's obviously, but of course, when you realise what it does actually really mean, you can get to the real grips of what it's all about. And would it be fair to say, before we get into these topics, that in your whole experience, the whole education system in the last 12 months, has it seen changes like it's never ever seen before? Are these some of the biggest changes you've ever seen? It's my interest.
Yes, because the changes that have come before have been, well, I think the biggest, the way that you could describe the changes are they were unexpected, although you could argue that there was a couple of months of it, we're seeing it coming. But the education world is notoriously slow in change. It takes a long time. You know, we discuss it, we consult, we'll go to government, we'll debate the process. Now you can get political about that, but that's broadly what happens. What happened over the pandemic is that, you know, literally on the Wednesday of a week in March 2020, the Prime Minister stood up and said, "Friday, you're closing." And I was in a school with a head teacher on that day, listening to the stuff coming out, and he said, "My goodness, on Friday we won't have any children." And all of a sudden, the year 11s had no rite of passage and they're leaving. There were no exams in the summer, you know, so that there were forced changes. Now, what's gone on for the last year in, you know, on and off with the lockdowns and the slight returns. I mean, schools never shut. They've been open. I mean, lots of my colleagues have been saying we've never been closed. We've just been open in a different way. You know, some teachers teaching children that are in the room, some that are you know, online, and others that are not anywhere and need to be found. So they're on the phone trying to find the children and have the conversation with the parents and so on. So it's been a tripling of the load. So I mean, I'm really, of course, I'll be loyal to my education colleagues in what's been described, but you know, people saying they're shut they've just not understood what's gone on in the place.
Yes. Yeah.
But has it brought? Yeah, it's brought a re-evaluation of what we mean by the process. So, and we'll you know, some of the things that I'll refer to in a minute have been really challenging. Yeah. So I think, you know, the instant change came because the circumstances were forced upon, you know, a normal sort of pattern behaviour. So you know, that's it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, no, that's no, I can see that, and I think the points that we've sort of planned to discuss today. Let me just slightly adjust the settings here, so it's a little bit closer, as it were. Really is around all the points that everyone saw on the slide deck a moment ago. I would just like to say a quick welcome to a few other people who joined us on the live stream, by the way. So, as I run out, so I've already said hello to you, so welcome. Jonathan, good to see you. Tom from sunny Cyprus. Sensible chap is enjoying the nice weather over there, no doubt. And Frank, welcome. And yeah, so we've got Frank there as well. So anyway, it's nice to see you on this live stream today. Do introduce yourselves in the chat, and we'd love to see any questions come up as well. But I think sort of leading into this really interesting point, this whole thing about extraordinary change and agility can lead to exceptional outcomes is a very big topic, isn't it? Because as we sort of move on a little bit into the new world, as it were, do you see education being much more blended, the whole education system, whether it's to do with schools and academies, all the way to universities, and also in the private sector? Do you see it on a sense in there's no going back, that actually the hybrid model is actually more the way things are going to happen generally with a lot of this now?
Yeah, it's a good question, Rupert. I think it's been happening for a number of years, but it's been seen to be. We know that's somebody else's territory. You know, so because if you consider what went on in MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where when they got into MOOCs, you know, this mass open online courses. You know, when they put a course together and expected 17 learners and got 25,000 online students across the world.
Wow.
You know, that's that's the revolutionary maverick position to start with. What's happened within the state education system and the independent education system is that it's been almost, rather than making a choice and seeing an opportunity, it's been forced into something. So, you know, the National Oak Academy, which was created in weeks to put online learning there, within Britain, was kind of behind what's been going on in the Far East, where they've been broadcasting lessons, you know, pretty much like this. But you'd think, you know, it's going to challenge the whole of the edge of the education system. You know, what happens when staff are not able to get into the building? Well, they can now remote teach. What happens where a teacher supply is challenging, where I've got one science teacher, for example, and I've got 7 science classes and I can only find one teacher? Well, I can broadcast that good teaching to the classes, and I didn't need a different skill base to manage the organisation of the children. What happens to children that are not in school? Well, we could standard broadcast to a child that's not in school, whether that's an exclusion or absence or long-term absence for illness. You know, we're now looking at the changing the ethic that we talk about. You know, I've said to schools, you know, what happens if it became illegal to exclude a child, because a child that's in a school is sticking to the social norms of that school, and when they break them, then there's sort of sanctions that are used, but they miss out on education. Well, you know, so we're in a position now where this whole environment is going to change. So do I see the future being blended? Absolutely, yes. I mean, I was talking to a head the other day that said to me, one thing that they've seen in this process, there's some disengaged learners have got really excited about online learning. And, you know, children that would have been quite quiet and disengaged in a classroom are now at the front of the video saying, I love this, I could do this, so this is brilliant, and showing some really stunning work. And then there's some, you know, some of the professors of education that we listen to, like people like John Hattie, are saying, stop talking about the gaps, because there are some children who are ahead of where they would have been because they've got excited about learning. Wow. And so, you know, there's the climate is different, and that's what, I mean, that's a big challenge to teachers, if that's what we've been used to. And I'd say at every level, you know, that there are some significant differences in primary education. I mean, online learning is not, you can't do it with the very young children, you know, or at least you do it differently with very young children. It needs to be supervised. It's that level of independence that you grow as you get older. You know, but the CIPD has been talking about this for years, you know, and the you know, corralling online learning is you know, really important.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I love the phrase you used earlier on about perhaps children returning back to school almost gone a little bit feral in some senses as well. So that on the plus side, I must admit I hadn't considered that at all, that perhaps children which would be reluctant to speak out normally because technology has perhaps broken that barrier down, it's enabled, you know, in children you know, in ways that people hadn't expected. But then I suppose the other side of it is we all need the social interaction, I guess, don't we? Both as adults and as children as well. But sort of coming to this question, we'll perhaps come back to some of this a little bit later on, if that's all right. But this phrase, VUCA, you know, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, can really define us. What can you just explain a little bit more about the thinking behind that the word VUCA and the principles behind it, and how that sort of really benefits, you know, how this has really helped now in the situation we find ourselves in today?
Look, as a leader, you're facing challenges in every circumstance. You know, as a school leader, I worked in challenging places, and we needed a way to kind of define or corral the thinking about our approach. What would we do? Now, the VUCA principles have come from, I mean, they're fairly well documented stuff. You know, some people are more aware of it than others. You know, it's a military term, and this idea of going into a battle situation where what I find is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. You know, and I need to discover. You know, if it's negotiation I need to go into, I want clarity as I move in. If If it's uncertainty, then I'm looking for, you know, that clarity of what's happening. And I remember, you know, leading, you know, big organisations. I mean, the last school I was employed at, we had 2,500 children growing to 3,500 children. So it was not small. I mean, 156 teachers, 250 employees. Now, in school terms, that was one of the biggest in the country. But there were, you know, it was in an area of the country that was challenging. You know, and every day I would go in and it would be uncertain what was going to happen during that day. You know, I won't go to the detail. We've talked about some of those in the past, but some really challenging circumstances, you know, some of which obviously prompted my decision to think differently about working in a different way. But in terms of what's there, the theory suggests that facing these 4 dimensions, I'll use all of my foresight, my intuition, my insight in the area to deal with the circumstances. So, you know, when I'm dealing with uncertainty, what I know I'm looking for is clarity of understanding. So I'm working with the people that I'm here. So you're feeling uncertain about this. So what we need to do is to get some shared understanding. Now, that shared understanding might challenge all of us, but we're going to learn something about where we are. If it's volatility that I'm after, you know, everything is flying all over the place, I want some vision, and I need to be able to see, where am I going? What is it that we're about to come down to core purposes? If it's complex, and quite often in schools, life is very complex, I'm looking for clarity. And that was, you know, something that I was told on many occasions, that's something that I was good at achieving. You know, so what do we need to do? Well, let's do it in stages. Let's deal with this and this and this, and the reason for doing it that way. And again, so all of this insight and understanding was going on. But that's why the discipline of thinking it like that, and I do that within the business now. I mean, one of the things that we faced in March last year was, you know, I'd spent every day of the last 10 years working with schools, traveling the country, doing, you know, 25,000 miles a year, traveling to them, and all of a sudden, schools are shut. Where's the business gone? Well, overnight, we pivoted to a different way of working, and I've worked with more schools since that point because we work differently. So, you know, facing this ambiguity and uncertainty, we pivoted what we were doing. You know, my team responded, and you know, that's why. So that discipline of thinking is important to me as an educator, but also as a business leader. I needed a way to respond to it. So VUCA to me is, yes, all of that stuff's there, but how do I respond? So what I'm looking for is, you know, vision, understanding, clarity, ambiguity, and agility. That, as I you know, so I mean, that's the one thing. Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
One of the schools I was working with, I'm not going to name anything, but that it was basically said, look, education is face-to-face. It's children in classrooms. We don't do this online stuff. We just, it's not for us. It's not proper education. We don't do it. Well, it happened to be an independent school, and the independent parents turned around and said, how is it that the comprehensive school down the road have managed to put on all of this online learning for the children? We are paying for education, and you're telling us it can't be provided. So thanks very much. We'll have our money back, and we'll go down the road to the free education. And they lost 80% of their clients overnight because they were unable to be agile and didn't see a way forward. Now that's the kind of response I'm talking about, and you know, how helping people to get to that position. You know, that's as, you know, that's business over. That's,
yeah,
you know.
God. I mean, I mean, I'm actually, I do remember telling me that private. I didn't want to bring it up just in case there was some sensitivity around that, but obviously you anonymized it and everything like that. But I mean, I think that's a really good example as well, because the you know, business, if bring it to a business context as well, it is those businesses which have been agile over the last 12 months or so, and been able to, and also adapted their model really to the new world that we're in at the moment, that actually have perhaps survived and thrived as well. So I think we can learn a lot from the education sector, especially, and you know, as well, the other difficulty I imagine in the education space too is this whole thing. Uncertainties, ambiguity is a big word as well, isn't it? Because presumably it's not just the the challenge of logistics of running a school and then suddenly having to pivot the whole model on its head, as it were. But it's also, through, irrespective of which government it is, education has always been a political football, hasn't it? So sort of managing, there's parts which you can manage, presumably as a leader of an academy or, a number of schools where you may be able to control your own budgets. But there are other things which are not expected, like, for example, what you're sharing to me about the cost of suddenly introduced COVID testing. Obviously, presumably a lot of that's funded by government, but then there's other parts in terms of perhaps the availability of enough teachers or enough people available to test the children. And have they been through this, sorry, not the CRB checks, what do they call the checks now?
DBS, it's the debarring service, yeah. But it's but it's CRB is so there is an opportunity there for there's a gap, there's an ambiguity in the process. As much as you want volunteers to work with children, and but every volunteer in a school needs to go through the Criminal Record Bureau testing or screening, because you don't want anybody having access to children, and we have to go through that process. So yes, there's ambiguity because we want things done quickly, and we need things done in a proper oriented way. But so it has left school leaders with some massive challenges. I mean, I've worked with lots of them that have said, I didn't go to university, or I didn't get trained as a teacher to be doing this. I'd have no idea. Well, so let's not underestimate. Schools are large organisations with now a number of adults. So the business leaders in schools have had a really challenging time. And you don't make any assumptions about things being paid for. One of the biggest challenges for schools is that they were told, you've got money because you've been building your reserves, and all schools have, because as they've academised, they need to build their reserves. Well, actually, a lot of the things that are going on are being spent out of those reserves. So where they've been responsible and efficient and built them, that a lot of those reserves have been depleted by some of the practices that have gone on. Now, that's not complaining, and I'm not responsible for one of those anymore. Actually, not as a head teacher. I am as a director of a trust. But there's some big challenges in there, and there are definitely ambiguities, and we might be looking for some certainty within it, but there's still some time to go on a lot of that.
Yes.
But that's part also of dealing with public financing, because there are restrictions. You say it's different from a private company, which is basically your money is your own and you deal with it as you need to pay your responsibilities. But obviously, delegated funds within the state sector, there are things you can spend the money on, and there are things you can't. So you need to be creative within that.
No, so it's interesting actually. Renata's made a couple of interesting points, of course, about the Open University. Of course, that's been providing online learning for years, hasn't it? So and also, I don't know, Renata, you've obviously done your homework here. So apparently, the U.S. Army War College introduced the concept of VUCA. Now, there's always been a rivalry between our American friends across the pond and us Brits, as it were. It'd be interesting to know where actually the Brits came up with the concept first and the Americans nabbed it, or the other way around. But that's another big point. And welcome, Karen, as well. It's nice to see you here today. So,
Rupert, I wouldn't get into the competition. It's a great theory wherever it came from, and it's about active learning, and that's this is about a concept. I mean, as a teacher, that's what I'm all about. There's a concept to get hold of. And our response to that is a learnt lesson, and you develop it. So Renato, thank you for that. I'm aware a little of the history as I've been shown it, but yes, it's true. I'm not going to get into which side of the pond it started on.
It's nothing but a bit like a bit of fun and friendly rivalry, as it were. But in terms of the sort of next point relating to what we're talking about here, you talk about a lot about mapping your territory and how that's a really, really important way to visualize. Can you give us first of all, a bit of background to what you mean by that, but also give us some examples as well.
I had the privilege in, it was just late February, just before the pandemic began, to work with a guy called Anthony Willoughby, who's a bit of an entrepreneur and an expert in what's referred to as territory mapping. well, I was in a seminar with the CEO Growth Academy, and he did this territory mapping with us, which is effectively it's indigenous leader visualization, where you say, so just map what your territory feels like. Now, what the process was to draw, and given what I was feeling about the education before all the pandemic happened, I drew a picture of the schools being challenged by government, by Ofsted, by finances, and parents, and the influence on them, and the work that I've been doing, which is really to free up your thinking around where we could go. So developmental work, not doing the things the way we've always done them. I drew a map which was basically, there's another world on the other side of the gorge, which nobody seems to want to move into, but there's lots of things that we could be doing differently. Well, a month later, after that session, I drew this map that I found quite, it helped me to strategize about what we were doing. So we hit this pandemic period, the schools all closed. There was this uncertainty about what was going to happen, and the National Oak Academy came, and online learning started to be talked about. Where I'd been talking about that for 10 years before that. I mean, actually, as a school leader, that's what we were starting to get into, as I've sort of referred to some of those things earlier. But I saw this challenge. Now, the map has actually been used all over the world with Anthony's territory mapping expertise. But then a month later, I was working with Anthony again, and I drew another map, and I started to draw these sand pits on the other side of the gorge, where we've got this opportunity to play and explore and develop and look at new ways forward. Well, I was talking to Anthony about a month ago, and he said, well, do me another one now. So I was starting to visualize, and as you start to think this through, I've got the map actually on the screen in front of me here, and I can see all of the opportunities that, in governance, in leadership, in children, in classrooms, in training, in CPD, as we refer to it. All of these aspects of school life are kind of opened by this new world. Now, territory mapping has been a way of visualizing it, putting it on a paper, mapping it to, so what is the territory I work in? What does it feel like? What are the opportunities? Where are the challenges? Where are the what they call the swamps? Where do I get stuck and I can't move out of it? What are these challenges? Now, this process that we've been through was used with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates when they were discussing how to face polio. They did, so they got their teams together and they drew the maps. And what we now know as the polio eradication process that they've been working towards came out of one of these territory mapping sessions, actually done on the Great Wall of China. They were standing on the Great Wall of China with that's where Anthony did it. Now, we've got into that process, but it's been so liberating. That sense of being able to, I understand my territory. I know, so where am I? What does it feel like? What are the barriers to moving forward? Now, visualization practice it's not new. It's been around for years. It's just a way of bringing this. In doing so, I've had the opportunity to talk to Maasai leaders and university professors from the States. Christo Brand, was Nelson Mandela's prison guard. All of these people have been involved in a kind of a world view of, okay, so what does the world look like in the future? What could it be? Where could we be moving? And out of that, we've done online assemblies with children. Christo has actually come in and doing an assembly with some schools in Britain. We've got sessions going on in the Middle East and the Far East. We've got learning about setting up children into this process of what's your life, your ground like, and what's the opportunity for the future. So that's what I mean about that. This pivoting to another way. It's I'll get very enthusiastic about it.
I must admit, I'm slightly disappointed with something, actually, because what I would like to have done before today, and I should have thought about it, might have been nice to have brought up a couple of those little graphics on the screen, actually, because I think you're talking about they're the ones which are hand drawn out, which are very visual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
They're all done that way. It's a kind of it's an instant response to your current circumstances. Now I know it's being used in business development, certainly in the States. Some of the bigger business universities the professors have got hold of it, because some of the brain science behind it is really, really fantastically. It's tying up with what people understand about the way we build our thinking, and challenging the way we put our thinking together. So sorry, Rupert, I should have had that to put on the screen.
I think it might take me more than a minute or two to bring it up, so I don't want to delay today's session over it. But I was very, very intrigued and very impressed by those. So thank you for that. But actually, visualization also to me is really important. So, although I've never been checked, I believe I'm dyslexic, because if anyone's had to read my writing, let's put it this way, even I can't read my own writing, and I'm not joking there. Unfortunately, today with computers and keyboards and iPads and this stuff, it gets around it. But if I actually wrote words and letters down, they actually come out the wrong way round. It's really strange. So I'll know how things are spelt, but I'll still get it completely wrong, and the words in the wrong order. But visualization, certainly for me as well, and also for business too, I've found a very powerful tool. So I actually do use a lot of mind mapping tools as well. So there's some very structured frameworks like you've described there, but which are very visual. And also the nice thing is you encourage lots of people to work together on it as well. I'd imagine it's immensely powerful. So
I mean, that's one of the, this thing about getting in the VUCA environment, it's not an individual activity. If you're leading a group of people, it's coming to a shared understanding. One of the powerful things about visualization is that you can do it with a team. What do you think about? I mean, I know it's been done with sales teams, and it's done with marketing teams, and it's done with service teams. What are the barriers that you're dealing with? And you're absolutely right, Rupert. I see learning difficulties learning difficulties is a way of describing the fact that you do it differently. It's not that it's wrong or it's a problem. It's the fact that your brain does things differently.
Yeah.
How you find the way to communicate your way through that's the complexity part of it. Well, we just want to get down to some certainty. So you want to be able to find a way of communicating that stuff. Now, I know in my school career, we had some really challenging circumstances, dyslexia or dyspraxia or dyscalculia, all of those things. So you find ways of handling it. Dyslexia is not a barrier to learning. Sorry, Rupert.
No, sorry. It's also if you've got very responsive teachers for that type of thing, people can really excel with this type of. Some cases they can be seen as major disadvantages, but quite often people really excel in other ways, or people excel in other ways, don't they? So because perhaps they do see things differently to the rest of us. What I'd quite like to do as well, also just bring up some of the comments actually, because Renata's made a really interesting point there, which I thought was it was quite interesting, and obviously we won't talk about our friends across the pond anymore, I promise you. And then we've got Simon Ward, which is an interesting point, isn't it, about these changes that also amplify opportunities for long-term learning. And Mike has referred to similarities with process mapping and continuous improvements in the business. So I'm not sure Daniel Kenning's here today, but no doubt if he is, Daniel might want to interact here. And it's interesting. So in fact, I don't know whether this has prompted any thoughts from you here, Chris, that you feel you would like to add with some of these comments that have come back so far as part of this session.
It's one of the biggest challenges for the education process. Tomlinson at the turn of the millennium tried to speak to the education system and saying that there's lots of different skills for children. There are lots of different ways out, and it's not one route. What you've illustrated in what you've described, so Renata's talking here about remapping your synapse. Yes, it can be done, and it's not just to make you do something in a particular way, because you become the normal way of doing it. But we actually have to map that each of us are individual and respond differently in all these circumstances. So it's not, you know, mind mapping might be the way that you find it easy to do, where somebody else will write an essay, or somebody will listen to something, you know, because they're very switched on to auditory learning.
Yeah.
I was interested in, I think Renato, I seem to pick up on a lot of what you said. When the storm comes, you need to be flexible as the willow and not rigid as the oak. It's true. The picture that always comes to my mind is the Albert Einstein. You know, if we treat everybody, you know, if we ask everybody to climb a tree, the monkey can climb the tree, but the fish won't. Now, it doesn't mean that the fish is going to live the life saying I've failed. It's just that they weren't built to climb the tree. But they can swim brilliantly. Now, the thing is that we've got to be flexible enough within the storm that we're seeing at the moment. Now, this is the only way we validate learning. The only way is to do an examination at the end of a 2-year program or a three-year program. Well, sorry, I don't believe that. I believe that children learn on the way and actually pick up a whole lot of stuff that we don't ever validate. And there are some brilliant leaders out there who are getting involved in. I mean, I've talked to some of them that have done the territory mapping, have got some fantastic ideas, and it'll be really interesting to see where they are in 5 or 10 years' time and what impact they're making on the world. Whether it's not going to make any difference how many GCSEs they've got or A levels or whatever, they've got the personality, the tenacity, and the ability to do something really significant. That's what we've got to capture, and I think that's what this challenge has done. You know, so.
That's very profound, actually, Chris. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I suppose this we're talking about how to get to grip in VUCA situations through clarity, trust, and shared purpose, but also about agility under pressure requires renewed vision and determination. How do you see all this sort of playing out in this type of context? We're now hopefully getting through the worst of what we've ever experienced in certainly my lifetime and most others. But there's going to be massive change again, isn't there? Because you've now got perhaps the high street, which has largely been decimated by what's sort of been going on. Obviously, thank God there's been some form of financial support out there, although that can never be adequate. But in real terms, of course, the businesses which haven't adapted are going to be the ones that really struggle coming through on the other side. But we're in a sort of business context. Where would you see this whole thing around agility and renewed vision and determination sort of really feeding through as a matter of interest?
That's an interesting. I mean, I'm an educator, and the school world has been my life. You know, I've dabbled with business, and you know, we've been successful. I would suggest that it's being able to be flexible in your thinking. It's looking for opportunities. It's acting in the moment, and you know, with vision and insight, so that you know that hindsight and insight and foresight, you need those abilities. But you also you know, people that stand still and say, well, look, it's not what I know, therefore I can't do anything. I've never been that way. I mean, that's where I found the territory mapping helpful, because I've been able to sort of, yes, look, if we go that way, there's opportunity there. The thing I've found, just as an anecdote, is I would suggest that lots of people, you know, when you see other people going that way, like with, you know, as we've talked before, Rupert, about broadcasting and webinars, I saw an opportunity to get into webinars, but I saw very quickly that everybody was doing webinars, and I found after a short space of time that there was a kind of debt in, you know, there was just a surplus of these things, and you know, the market was flooded with it, and therefore it wasn't an opportunity to go into. So you've got to be able to use your foresight and vision to say, well, okay, it may be an opportunity to move to, but I need to be flexible enough to say, what's the right thing? Now, in the commercial market, you know, it's clear that shops that were able to, you know, I say shops, but you know, businesses that are selling have been able to be agile and respond. You know, so you know, the car manufacturers that are now making PPE is a good example of that. They're not going to keep doing that forever, but it was, you know, in the moment. I suppose the challenge ahead is those that have got the foresight to see change, you know, kind of be the apples of the future, to say, look, you don't know you need it now, but actually some of this stuff you are going to need in the future. So let's be a, you know, so I'm corralling all of that foresight, insight, and hindsight. I know where I've been, I know where I am, I know where I'm going, but I might need to be able to steer that a little. Sorry, that's a long answer, but does that make sense, Rupert?
It's a really good response, actually. And where do you think the private sector, particularly, we talk about, you know, entrepreneurs running very small businesses, perhaps to larger SMEs where they may be employing 100, 250 people, up to the corporates. What do you think? What do you believe that those sectors themselves can really learn from what's happened in education and the way, especially education, has been able to, it has pivoted what it's doing to a large extent? And I mean, it also, the whole thing around this is fascinating, isn't it? Because presumably this change would have happened, but it may have happened over 5 or 10 years, possibly, whereas it's all been done in a matter of a few months. And, you know, but in real terms, what can the private sector learn really from the education space? We always say it's the other way around, or some people do, but how about the other way around? What can we learn from it? The agility that's been shown in the whole education system that can feed through into business.
I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that until, but I'll have a bash. I would suggest that agility, wherever it is, it's a leadership question. It's not an education question. It's, you know, wherever we are. I mean, my expertise is in corralling, understanding, shaping concepts and delivering that to the people that we're working with, in my case, secondary age children. So that's my industry. But in any industry, you've got to have a deep understanding of what you're trying to achieve. That's the visionary part. But the ability to pivot, the ability to respond to the market. I mean, we've seen many examples where, you know, this is what we do and we don't do anything else, and they've failed when people have said, I don't want that anymore. You know, we need to move on. So how the big business, I would suggest, has got the biggest challenge because it tends to be more fixed in its ways. The smaller businesses, in my observation, tend to be more agile because they're responding, because they know they need to survive. So they've got that in their mindset. To survive as a small organization, we need to be able to respond. So I would suggest the one thing that big business needs to do is to be able to pivot and to be flexible and understand, you know, does that, you know, yeah, I'm not a big business.
No, I think this is really interesting. I think the other part around this as well, which, I mean, at the end of the day, schools have had to respond massively to what's going on, is, you know, you need to look, for example, if you look at some of the corporate sectors, and obviously there are many corporate organizations which are very well run, they really care about customer service, things like this. But there's one organization will remain completely nameless. But what I can't believe is they just haven't adapted to what's really going on at all. If anything, their customer service has got 10 times worse. They're still trying to take out full premiums for a service they can't provide. They seem to think it's okay. Obviously, customers are asking for refunds. They're not giving refunds. They're still expecting to take out the normal payments. And what I find shocking is you've got an institution there which has become a dinosaur. But unfortunately, because it's a utility company, they feel they've got a captive market and they do what they like. And I think it's really interesting that if you look at what's been happening in education, how that's gone through massive change, really massive change very quickly. And then how that's, you know, you've seen massive change within small, medium, some larger size companies as well, where they made massive change. And they've recognized this is a real time to actually focus on customer delivery and quality of service and showing that you care. You know, at the end of the day, people remember how you make these individuals, we all remember how people make us feel, don't they? So, and, you know, if you go back to the education space, the love and the care and the attention the teachers show for their the students or the children in the schools and so on.
Yeah.
To me, it's you know, it's very humbling to see that, and some of the short stories you've shared around that have been immensely powerful. Now, what I'm going to do, if it's all right, is I'm going to do like a 3 or 4 minute little bit of wrap up, which covers for next week. But I'd like to come back and ask you the final question in just a second. And just so you're prepared for it as well, this is very much talk about how extraordinary change can result in amazing outcomes. So if you were able to think of a few of those, Chris, it'd be lovely to do that. And also, those of you who are joining us on today's live stream, a number of you have been very proactive today as well. And but do come up with some questions. We can have a little bit of a wrap up at the end, which will be a little bit of fun. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again just for a second. And there we go. So what I'm going to just cover now, well, let me just go back a step. This is obviously what we've been talking about today. And obviously, we're going to talk about number 5 in just a moment. Just leading a little bit into next week, next Thursday, we've got Marcus Tomlinson joining us, and he's going to be talking about the 7 key mindsets of successful people, how to have more influence over your future, how to feel less stressed, how to love yourself and your business, how to get more meaningful goals or set more meaningful goals, how to create a vision that inspires you, how to get things done, and how to radiate confidence in yourself and other clients. My God, those are big subjects, actually. So I don't think we have any shortage of points to talk about there. And one of the things I just urge you to do amongst all of us here, obviously a number of you are regulars as part of this session today, but I would encourage you to think how you can collaborate and work with each other and also refer as well. And the great thing is a number of you are regulars as part of today's sessions. What's really good is what I'd like to feel is a really deep relationship of trust has been built as well, having this real sense of community and working together. In terms of what's happening in April, we've got our next mini conference. There's a little bit of a shift in tone for this next one, which is really going to be covering a lot of the points discovered before. So, those of you who are regulars to this, don't feel you need to come to this. Those of you who are a little bit new to these things, do join in. We'll, in terms of what we will be covering, though, in terms of relating, so let's go back a slide here, to about explaining how you can bring your sales forward, amplify your brand, and get your time back. We'll also be explaining how you can look at your ideal marketing mix, including the social selling blueprint, how you can have your balanced product portfolio, how to maximize sales through LinkedIn, and how to use Time Machine, BizGrowth Time Machine, to transform your business. And this is very much focused around your value, your brand optimization, your brand amplification, your social selling blueprint, which is the lead generation, prospect nurturing, sales optimization systems, and also the whole part about managing client enhancement and referral systems so you can really build and grow your business from strength. In terms of how to access these good things, you can register for the mini conference from the homepage of our website. You could, if you don't have time to join us in the mini conference, because that is like an afternoon session, you can join us on a 55-minute on-demand webinar. Now, some of the content's going to be updated on that fairly soon. So if you have taken part in one of these about in the last 4 or 5 weeks, you might want to wait a couple of weeks. But for those of you who are very new to these things, especially around generating more business, you'll find it generally useful. You can register also for these Thursday live streams directly from our website. And if you choose the recurring option rather than the continue option, you can register for multiple weeks, which saves you having to do so each time, and it will send you reminders through so you don't forget as well. And you can also register for what we class as a BizGrowth sales and marketing diagnostic. It asks a series of mainly yes/no questions, takes between 4.5 and 6 minutes to complete, and you'll get an 8-page personalized report at the end of it. And from that, you can also book in a call with myself or with Muriel, and we'll discuss that with you. And I'm going to come back to these contact details in just a moment. So let's come back to Chris now. And Muriel, would you like to join us as well? Because it's always nice to see you too. So Chris, focusing really on this last point, really about how extraordinary change can result in amazing outcomes. No pressure. Any thoughts around this? First of all, in the educational space, potentially, and how perhaps business leaders can business owners can take away from that as well.
That's a massive question. It is. I would look. It's what we've seen is some incredible young people in the education world responded. One example, I sat with a head teacher in a school who'd said, look, I've had about 17 children out of nearly 2,000 in the building because they're looked after children. And this young lady brought in the work that she'd done at home. And she said, look, while I've been at home, I've seen what I want to do in the future. I've focused my thinking about where I want to do. I want to go into film makeup. And as a result, I've created this portfolio. And honestly, she put on the table this portfolio of artwork that she'd created off her own back with no lead from anyone. And it was absolutely stunning. It was about 100 pages of A2, so massive, drawings. Now, what this produces is the freedom for people to be creative and to show their worth. Now, there are other students out there that have done some equally amazing but different stuff. So the question is, how does our rigidity lead us into very narrow thinking and very closed outcomes? And where these challenges come, the opportunities to open the doors to some new thinking, break the synapse in our brain, do some different things. So some of the outstanding outcomes, and there won't be just artwork, there'll be, all sorts of things. Mike asked a question in the, how has academization affected the quality of state schooling, and has this reduced the gap to the private sector? That's a long answer to that one, and I'm not going to go into it. I don't think the gap is as big as people have suggested it might be, and there are reasons for that. But what both sectors have been challenged to do is to be agile and to allow children to learn in a very independent position. Now, what we're used to is social order. Businesses are equally, the culture and climate they create are constraining in some ways. I can't be as creative as I want to be because I've got to do the stuff according to these rules. Well, maybe on occasions we need just to say, let's stand back a bit, be as creative as you can be, and let's see where this goes. I did that with some of my teams, and some of the stuff they came out with, we're still living with now. So I would say this has perhaps given us the opportunity to say, let's let the shackles off a little bit. Let's, disorder is uncomfortable, but let people do what they do best. And we know what motivates people. The science tells us, it's autonomy, it's mastery, and it's purpose. Well, when I find those things, then I can be, we can be breaking the bounds and doing some really exceptional stuff. So that's my answer to the question. The amazing results come through pressure, but just let go a little bit and let people be creative.
Wow, yeah, and I think that's really powerful. Actually, the other part is, I suppose, really, again, a lot of good leadership also will encourage other leaders within the business to try things out. And if a few things fail or it doesn't work terribly well, guess what? We all learn from that, and we come out with much better solutions moving forwards as well, isn't it? So, which is really interesting one. And I think it's absolutely fascinating, really, what's evolved, especially in the education space and the learning from that. And yes, we've got an interesting period over the next 6-9 months, where this awful thing is going to come back and mutate, and some of the vaccines might need to be updated and all this stuff. But, thank goodness we're, hopefully coming through the worst of this now. And, it's going to be an opportunity for businesses that, and of course the education sector, but businesses who are nimble and got through all this now, to probably discover whole new markets which they didn't even realize existed before, and also whole new business models. I think this whole thing around agility, VUCA, and put it this way, is over the next year or two going to lead to some amazing new innovations, new creative projects coming through new product innovations, new solutions. To me, yes, there's been major drawbacks, but I think we're going to see an amazing year or two ahead as a lot of these entrepreneurs and business leaders and engineers and architects and software engineers and so on come up with some amazing solutions which we've never even dreamt of. So I think on that note, I would very much like to probably call this a bit of a wrap. Muriel, is there anything you would like to add to today, or in terms of this?
No, only that a lot of what Chris said really does get you thinking about things. And for me, you know, when the school closed, I thought that was it. I thought they were literally closed. But as you said, there was a lot going on still inside. Yeah. No, yeah. Great.
Yeah, lovely. Chris, any closing comments from you that you'd like to leave as a closing thought you'd like to leave people?
Don't be closed-minded to an open future. That's the, you know, there's a world out there of and people more creative than we give them credit for often. So, you know, just release the shackles occasionally and let some stuff come out of it. I think that's what we've learned.
Don't be closed to an open future. I love it. Can I nick that phrase? I think it's brilliant. All right. Well, look, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today, and Chris, for your very kind contribution. I will bring this slide up very quickly again because I didn't give everyone a chance to jot down Chris's details. It's cj-learning.com is Chris's website. Chris's mobile phone number is there, 07738 736 462. And if you'd like to reach out to Chris, it's chris.jones@cj-learning.com. So remember, it's cj-learning.com. And welcome, Chris. Thank you very much. Done a fantastic job, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week. So take care, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.